Tell your story.
Change the conversation.
Organized by students.
TEDx Youth at SHC.
I'll be honest, back when we were all stuck at home, some of us navigating online school, others just trying to make it through the endless Zoom calls, there was one unexpected silver lining. Nobody ever knew what your bottom half looked like. I once took a math final in a shirt, pajama pants, and a Hello Kitty blanket wrapped around my waist, like a superhero cape. I was living my best double life. And for a while, we could be whoever we wanted to be, at least from the waist up. But beyond the fun and freedom of online school, we were wearing a different kind of mask, a physical one, everywhere we went. Because for the first time, we were forced to cover our faces, even from the people we loved the most. And when you wear a mask like that, you notice something strange. You can't tell if someone is smiling. You can't really see if they're laughing. The corners of their mouth, the little micro expressions, the subtle twitches of nervousness or joy are all gone. Suddenly, communication felt distant, muted, not just physically, but emotionally. And I remember something hitting me like a truck. That physical mask I wore every day was just a reflection of an emotional one I'd been wearing for years. I had become so good at curating myself, what I said, how I acted, how I looked, because I thought if I could just be perfect, I'd avoid rejection. But perfection is a lonely performance. I used to think I was protecting myself from judgment, but really, I was protecting myself from connection. And that's when I started thinking about grit. Now, one of the most inspiring ideas I've ever come across comes from, funny enough, a TED Talk by researcher Angela Duckworth, where she introduces the concept of grittiness. Grittiness, as she defines it, is the belief that our ability to grow is driven by effort and perseverance and not inherent talent. In fact, grit can sometimes be the opposite of raw talent. We often talk about this concept, we glamorize it, we admire it and hold it up as a key to success. I once believed that grit was the ultimate pathway to achievement, persisting through challenges, enduring discomfort, and powering through difficulties. It's a mindset that echoes the Stoic philosophy of the ancient Greeks. Feelings are a weakness, emotions are irrelevant, just push through. Now, don't get me wrong, I still believe in the power of grit and truly value its importance. But over time, I've come to realize that grit alone is not the entire picture. Because here's the reality. You can grit your way through a math test. You can grit your way through, say, basketball practice. But you cannot grit your way through loneliness. You cannot grit your way through agony. Now, COVID forced me to confront an important truth. During this time, I began tutoring a 5th grader just as I was finishing 8th grade. And I learned something new. Children are inherently resilient. They can bounce back, they can try again, and they can keep going. But resilience alone isn't enough if they feel incapable or believe they are failing. When they perceive the person teaching them as flawless and untouchable, they shut down. In those moments, resilience becomes more of a barrier than a tool for growth. I carried this lesson with me as I stepped into new leadership roles. When I started Unify STEM, an organization dedicating to unifying the youth through an early introduction to STEM, I thought my role was simply to lead, to inspire, and instruct. But over time, I learned that my true responsibility was to actually model vulnerability. So I decided to shift my approach. Instead of presenting myself as someone who had all the answers, someone who was there to teach, I embraced a new mindset. I told them about my constant challenges with programming, which often feels like learning a foreign language where the rules change every few minutes, and sometimes Google can be my best friend. As I allowed myself to be imperfect, they began to feel safer. They laughed more, they asked more questions, and they started to take risks. They failed, and then they tried again. And eventually they succeeded on their very own terms. Now, this experience helped me realize just the true power of vulnerability. Dr. Brené Brown, a research professor at the University of Houston, conducted a study on vulnerability and shame, and what it truly means to be seen. She interviewed hundreds of people from all walks of life, exploring their relationships, their experiences with shame, and how they navigated these feelings of vulnerability. And what she found was surprising. The ones who were willing to admit that they did not have all the answers were the ones who experienced the most joy, connection, and fulfillment in their lives. In fact, her research showed that people who embrace vulnerability are 32% more likely to form meaningful relationships and report higher levels of life satisfaction. This is not because they were weaker or more fragile, but because they were braver. They were not afraid to let others see their flaws, and in doing so, they allowed for deeper connection and more meaningful growth. Vulnerability, as Dr. Brown's research reveals, is not a weakness. It is the foundation of growth, connection, and success. It is the key ingredient that turns effort into transformation and leadership into legacy. But what I've come to understand is this: it was never the mask that made me strong. It was the courage it took to remove it. So don't let fear dictate what holds anything back. The stories built around vulnerability should not be barriers to growth. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't pushing through or standing tall. It's recognizing the struggle and allowing others to sit beside it. So the Hello Kitty blanket I used to wear during Zoom sessions, well, it turns out it wasn't a cape that made me a superhero. It was the moment I chose to stop hiding. It was never the mask that made you strong. It was you all along. Thank you.